My daughter called me 3 days before Christmas to tell me not to come. She did it kindly. That was the part that stayed with me. There was no cruelty in her voice, only a kind of tired carefulness, the way you speak to a man you are afraid of hurting. "It's just easier this year, Dad," she said. "Spencer's father is hosting. There'll be important people there. Please don't make it hard." I sat at my kitchen table with the phone warm against my ear. On the counter, still in its cardboard box, was the tin star my wife made our first Christmas together. I had not put it up yet. I had been waiting, I think, for a reason. "I understand," I told her. I did not raise my voice. I have never been a man who raised his voice. But something in my chest went very still, the way a house goes still when the furnace finally cuts out on a cold night. "Thank you," she said, and then softer, "I love you." "I love you too, sweetheart," I said. And I meant it. I always meant it. But I am getting ahead of myself. My name is Harlan Whitlock. I am 69 years old, retired, a widower. I live in a small city in central Kentucky, in the same house I have lived in for 46 years. I fixed pipes and furnaces in this town for 37 of those years. Whitlock Mechanical, 1 truck when I started, 9 trucks when I sold it. The town knows me as the plumber. That is a fine thing to be known as. When your basement floods at 2 a.m. in February, you are not looking for a poet. You are looking for a man with a wrench who answers his phone. For 37 years, I was that man. My wife was Eleanor. Everybody called her Nell. She kept the books for the company, and she kept me, and she did both with the same patient hands. She made that tin star our first Christmas when we could not afford a real topper. Tin snips and an old coffee can, and 2 hours at the kitchen table with her tongue between her teeth. It has topped every tree in this house since 1979. Nell died 3 years ago. Cancer. It took her slowly, which people say is a mercy, and I suppose it is, though I have never been able to say the word mercy about that year without it catching in my throat. Since then, the house has been quiet in a way I'm still learning. Her chair is still by the window. I never moved it. Some mornings I pour 2 cups of coffee before I remember, and then I drink them both, and I do not feel foolish about it. On Thursdays, I take my coffee at the diner on Main, in the same booth I have used for 30 years. Loretta pours it without asking. The men my age gather there and complain about their knees and their grandchildren and the price of everything, and it is one of the great small comforts of my life. Nobody at that diner knows the thing I'm about to tell you either. To them, I am Harlan, who unclogged the church basement for free in '98 and never let the pastor pay him. Harlan, who kept the Hendricks family's furnace running the winter Ray Hendricks was dying and somehow never sent a bill. I have found that a reputation like that is a kind of camouflage. People decide you are simple because you are kind, and gentle because you are quiet, and poor because you never talk about money. They are wrong on all 3 counts. I never corrected them. There is a strange freedom in being underestimated. Nobody asks much of a man they have already made up their minds about. Nell used to laugh about it. "Let them think what they think, Harlan," she would say. "We know what is in the coffee can. That is the man the town sees. A quiet old plumber with a good truck he never sold and a dog he talks to more than he should. A man who tips well at the diner and waves from his porch and asks after your kids by name. That is almost all of it, but not quite. There was one more thing about me that nobody knew. Not my daughter, not her husband, not the man hosting Christmas. I will get to it. Let me tell it the way it happened. Let me tell you first about the small cuts, because that is how these things go. Not all at once, a little at a time, so slow you talk yourself out of noticing. My daughter Meredith married Spencer Ashcombe 12 years ago. He is not a bad man. I want to say that plainly because it matters later. He is a soft man who was raised by a hard one, and he spent his whole life trying to earn a nod from a father who handed out nods like they cost him blood. Spencer's father is Sterling Ashcombe. In our part of the state, that name means something. Sterling builds things, subdivisions, a shopping center, an office park out by the interstate, with his name on a stone at the entrance. He wears good suits and he has a firm handshake, and he has spent 40 years making sure everyone in a room knows exactly where they rank in it. The first time I met Sterling, he shook my hand and looked at my hands while he did it. Working hands. Thick knuckles. A nail I lost in 1991 that never grew back right. He smiled at them the way you smile at a dog that has done a trick. A tradesman, he said. We need more men who work with their hands. And then he turned to talk to someone else. It went like that for years, and I let it. When you are the father of the bride and the other family has the big house and the important friends, you learn to make yourself small. It is a kindness you do your child. You swallow things so they do not have to. At Sunday dinners at the estate, Sterling would introduce me to his guests. This is Harlan, our handyman, does wonderful work, salt of the earth. Everyone would chuckle, warm and easy, and I would nod, and Meredith would look at her plate. Once, at a birthday for my granddaughter, Spencer corrected the way I was holding my fork. In front of his mother, in front of the room. He did it gently, almost apologetically, but he did it, and I set the fork down the way he showed me, and I saw my daughter's jaw go tight, and she said nothing. That was the thing I kept coming back to. She said nothing. There was a Thanksgiving, 2 years back, that I think of often. I am not a man who gives expensive gifts. I never learned how, and I never saw the point. That year, I made Meredith a cutting board, walnut and maple, glued up in my shop over 3 weekends, sanded until it felt like water under your hand, finished with oil the way Nell taught me. I wrapped it in butcher paper because that felt right. Meredith opened it at the Ashcombe table, and her whole face changed. Soft. The way it used to when she was small. She ran her thumb along the grain, and before she could say a word, Camille Ashcombe leaned over and said, warmly, the way cruel things are so often said warmly, "Oh, how rustic. Spencer, remind me to give your father-in-law the number for that place that does the marble ones." The table chuckled, and Meredith set the cutting board down on her lap, under the edge of the tablecloth, out of sight. I told myself that night that she had put it away because she agreed with them. I was wrong about that, too. She still has that board. Meredith told me later she used it every single day and washed it by hand and never once set it in front of them again because she was protecting it. From them. The way she was trying to protect me. A man can watch a thing for years and read it exactly backward. For 2 years, I watched Meredith choose silence over me, a little at a time. I would look for her at those dinners, waiting for her to speak up, and she never did. And slowly I built a story in my own head. The story was that my daughter had chosen them, that the big house and the good suits and the name on the stone had won, and that I had lost her by inches, and that there was nothing to be done about it but love her from the far end of the table. I believed that story completely. I want you to understand that. I believed it the way you believe the floor will hold your weight. I was wrong, but I did not know that yet. The one bright thing in all of it was Josie, my granddaughter. She is 6 years old and she has her grandmother's laugh, which is a cruel and wonderful trick for a child to play on an old man. Josie did not know that her grandfather was supposed to be an embarrassment. She would climb into my lap and take my hand in both of hers and turn it over and study it. "Grandpa," she said once, tracing the crooked nail, "your hands are the strongest hands." "They're just old, sweetheart," I told her. "No," she said very seriously. "They're the strongest." I carried that for a long time. On the bad days, I told myself I could carry anything for the sake of that child, and I almost believed it. So when Meredith called 3 days before Christmas and asked me not to come, I did not fight her. I told her I understood. I hung up. I looked at Nell's star in its box, and then I did something I had not planned to do. I decided to drive Josie's present over myself, not to the party, just to drop it off early so she would have it Christmas morning, even if her grandfather was not welcome at the table. That decision is the reason I know everything I'm about to tell you. I drove the 2 hours to the estate the next afternoon, the present wrapped on the passenger seat where Nell used to sit. It was a music box. Josie loved music boxes. I had found one with a little tin star on the lid, and I had thought, standing in the store, that Nell would have liked that she would have squeezed my arm and said, "That one, Harlan, that's the one." I meant to leave it with the housekeeper and go. I did not want to make a scene. I have never in my life wanted to make a scene. The side door by the kitchen was open a few inches, the way it gets when the caterers are coming and going. I stepped into the mudroom to leave the present on the bench. And through the study door, which was not quite closed, I heard Sterling Ashcombe's voice. "I will not have that man shuffling around in his good shirt while Warren Tice is deciding whether to fund the next phase," Sterling said. "Do you understand me? Tice is worth 30 years of runway to this family. I am not going to lose it, because your father cannot tell a salad fork from a garden trowel." I stopped where I stood. "He's my father," Meredith said. Her voice was thin. "He drove Josie to the hospital when she had her tonsils out. He shows up. He always shows up." "He is a plumber," Sterling said, "and this is a business, and I have carried your husband's business for 9 years, and I can stop carrying it any day I choose. So you will call your father and tell him to stay home. Or I stop covering Spencer's notes, and you can explain to my granddaughter why the house is gone. Your choice, Meredith." There was a silence then, a long one. I stood in that cold little mudroom with a music box in my hands, and I listened to my daughter cry. Not loud, she has never been loud, just the small broken sound of a person being made to choose between the two halves of her own heart. "Fine," she said finally. "Fine, I'll call him." I set the present down on the bench very carefully, and I turned around and I walked back out to my truck, and nobody ever knew I was there. I want to tell you what I felt, sitting in that truck. It was not anger. That came later in a small controlled way, the way a pilot light comes on. What I felt first was shame, because for 2 years I had told myself a story about my daughter, and the story was a lie, and I had believed the lie because it was easier than the truth. The truth was that she had not chosen them. She had been made to. That call, 3 days before Christmas, that kind, tired, careful call, was not contempt. It was a ransom note read by a woman with a gun to her family's roof. I had spent 2 years being wrong about the wrong person. I drove home with the present still on the seat, and somewhere on that dark road between his house and mine, the pilot light came on, steady and blue, and I knew I was going to do something about it. I just did not yet know what. Now I have to tell you the thing nobody knew about me. This is the part where the story turns. When I sold Whitlock Mechanical in 2016, I sold it for more than anyone in town would have guessed. 37 years of a good name is worth something, and a man had been trying to buy me out for a decade. I took the money, and I put most of it away, because Nell and I never learned to spend, and because a man who grew up poor never quite believes the well will not run dry. A year after I sold in 2017, something happened that I have never spoken about to anyone but 2 people. Sterling Ashcombe's flagship development, the one out by the interstate with his name on the stone, was 1 payment away from foreclosure. I did not know it from him. Sterling would sooner have swallowed glass than tell a plumber he was in trouble. I knew it from Dewey Kessler, who ran the credit union for 30 years, and who has been my friend since we were boys. Dewey knew the shape of everybody's trouble in that county, and one afternoon over coffee he told me, "The way you tell a friend a piece of news, that Ashcombe Ridge was going under, and that the note was for sale, cheap, because the bank wanted it off their books before it went bad." I want to be honest about why I did what I did next. It was not charity. It was not a plot. It was simpler than either. My daughter and my granddaughter lived inside Sterling Ashcombe's world. If that world collapsed, it would land on them. Spencer's business ran on his father's credit. If Sterling went under, Spencer went under, and Meredith and Josie went with him. So I bought the note. I did it quietly through a small holding company Dewey helped me set up. I named it Nell's Ridge Holdings because Nell had died the year before that, and I wanted her name on something that would protect our girls. The note was secured by a recorded deed of trust on Ashcombe Ridge and on the estate itself. In plain words, I became the lender. I became the reason Sterling Ashcombe kept his front door. He never knew. The paperwork came from a holding company and a lawyer, and Sterling, who was drowning, took the rope and never once asked whose hand was on the other end of it. I imagine he assumed it was some fund in a city somewhere. It never occurred to him that the anonymous lender who saved his empire was the handyman he seated at the end of the table. For 9 years I held that note and I never called it, never pressed a payment, never enforced a term, never so much as sent a stern letter. I let it sit. It was not a weapon. It was a fence I built around my family without them knowing, and I intended to leave it standing there, quiet, forever. And then I stood in a cold mudroom and heard Sterling Ashcombe use my grandchild's roof as a leash on my daughter. The next morning I drove out to Dewey Kessler's place. Dewey is 72 now, retired like me, and he still keeps everything. He put the old folder on his kitchen table, the 2017 file, the note and the deed of trust, and 9 years of statements I never sent. "You could foreclose on Sterling Ashcombe by February, Harlan," Dewey said. He said it plainly, not egging me on, just laying the tool on the table so I could see it. "You'd be within your rights. Man's missed the spirit of that note for years. You call it, he's finished. His name comes off that stone." "I know," I said, and that was the trouble. I could. That was exactly the trouble. I sat in Dewey's kitchen and I let myself imagine it. Sterling Ashcombe learning, on some gray morning, that the plumber owned him, that the salt of the earth held the deed to his whole shining life. I will not pretend the picture had no pull. I am a man, not a saint. But then I heard Nell. Not really. I want to be clear that I am not a man who hears voices. But I have been married to that woman since I was 23. And after 42 years, you carry a person's voice around inside you, whether you like it or not, and hers spoke up in Dewey's kitchen as clearly as if she were pouring the coffee. "The measure of a man," Nell used to say, "is what he does with the wrench he could swing." Let the facts do the work, Harlan, not the anger. Anger's a tool that cuts the man holding it. I looked at the folder for a long time. "I'm not going to take his house, Dewey," I finally said. Dewey nodded slowly. "Then what are you going to do?" "I'm going to take his lever," I said. "The house stays where it is. But he does not get to hold my daughter's roof over her head. Not anymore. Not ever again." Dewey smiled a little, the way a man smiles when a thing turns out the way he hoped it would. "Nell would have liked that," he said. "Yeah," I said, "she would have." I drove home from Dewey's the long way that afternoon, past the church basement I fixed for free in '98, past the lot where Whitlock Mechanical used to keep its trucks, past the cemetery on the hill where Nell is. I did not stop. I just drove, and I let the anger burn down to something steadier and more useful than anger. What I landed on, by the time I pulled into my own driveway, was not a wish to hurt Sterling Ashcombe. It was a wish to be done being afraid of him on my daughter's behalf. There is a difference, and it took me the whole 2-hour loop of that county to find it. A man who wants to hurt you is still, in a way, held in your grip. A man who only wants to stop you from hurting the people he loves has let go of you entirely. I wanted to let go. That night I set Nell's star out on the kitchen table, and I sat with it a long while. I thought about all the Christmases it had topped, the lean ones and the good ones, the one after Meredith was born. The last one, when Nell was too sick to reach the top of the tree and I lifted her up so she could set it herself, both of us pretending her hands were not shaking. "All right," I told her. "I'll fix it, the quiet way, your way." And then I decided I was going to Christmas after all, and I was not going to go alone. I spent the 2 days before Christmas doing the least dramatic thing a man can do. I met with my lawyer. Her name is Frances Lindqvist. She has handled my business affairs since before I sold the company, and she is the kind of lawyer who reads every line twice and never once raises her voice, which is why I trust her. I laid it all out for her at her office. The note, the deed of trust, the 9 years, the mudroom. She read the file the way she reads everything, slowly, twice. "Harlan," she said when she was done, "I want to make sure you understand what you are holding. You own the note and the recorded deed of trust on Ashcombe Ridge and on that man's home. 9 years, never enforced. Legally speaking, you are the reason Sterling Ashcombe has a roof. You could remove it." "I don't want his roof," I said. "I want him to answer for using my daughters." Frances set the file down and folded her hands. "Then here is what I would propose," she said. "You refinance Spencer's obligations directly through Nell's Ridge Holdings, out from under his father entirely. Sterling loses the leverage over your son-in-law, which means he loses the leverage over your daughter. Sterling keeps his home, but the lever is yours, and you choose never to swing it. That is not revenge, Harlan. That is offense, moved to protect the right people." "That," I said, "is exactly what I want." Frances drew up the papers over 2 days. I read every line twice, the way she taught me and the way Nell taught me before her. A refinancing agreement. a release of Spencer's obligations from his father's guarantee, a quiet restructuring that would, on the 2nd of January, simply move a young man out from under a heavy thumb and set him down on ground of his own. No fanfare, no courtroom. Just paper, doing what paper does when an honest person holds it. Meanwhile, back in the bright house on the hill, they were certain of me. Meredith texted the day before Christmas to say she was sorry again and that she understood if I did not want to talk for a while. Sterling, I have no doubt, had already put me out of his mind entirely. The way you forget a bill you have decided not to pay. They had made their arrangements around my absence. They had counted on the quiet old plumber to do what the quiet old plumber always did. Swallow it and stay home and love them from the far end of the road. I intended to surprise them exactly once. There was one more thing. Francis told me that Warren Tice, the banker Sterling was so desperate to impress, had been trying for a year to identify the entity that held the Ashcombe Ridge note. Bankers do not like mysteries in the collateral of a man they are about to fund. Tice wanted to know who really stood behind Sterling before he wrote a check. He should know the truth, I said, before he funds a dime, not as an ambush, as a fact. Francis arranged a quiet word with Tice's office. Not a scheme, just the truth, walking into the room on its own 2 feet. On Christmas Eve, I pressed my good shirt again. I packed a single folder into an old leather case. I picked Josie's music box up off my own kitchen table, where I had brought it back home, still wrapped, still waiting. I looked at Nell's tin star, which I had finally that morning taken out of its box. "All right, Nell," I said to the empty kitchen. "Let's go set the table." Christmas Day, I drove the 2 hours one more time. Frances followed in her own car. We did not speak on the way. There was nothing left to plan. The estate was lit up like a magazine. Cars along the drive, the good kind. Through the tall windows I could see the party, the suits, the dresses, the tree that a decorator had done, tasteful and cold, with no tin star anywhere on it. I walked up the steps and I rang the bell. Sterling Ashcombe opened the door himself. His face, when he saw me, went through 3 things very fast. Surprise, then anger. Then a smooth, hosting smile pulled down over both of them like a shade. "Harlan," he said, "I thought we agreed you would sit this one out." "Merry Christmas, Sterling," I said. Behind him in the bright room, I saw my daughter turn and see me and go absolutely still. I saw Spencer's face fall. I saw Josie, across the room, spot me and start toward the door with her whole body the way children do. "This isn't the day for this," Sterling said, low, stepping halfway out onto the porch to keep his voice off the room. "There are people here. I will not have a scene." "There won't be a scene," I said. "I brought my lawyer." And Francis Lindqvist came up the steps behind me. I have thought a great deal about the look on Sterling's face in that moment. He did not understand yet, but some old animal part of him understood that the ground had shifted, and his smile went uncertain at the edges. Frances stepped up beside me, calm as a Sunday. "Mr. Ashcombe," she said, "my name is Francis Lindqvist. I represent the holder of the note and the deed of trust on this property and on Ashcombe Ridge. My client would like 10 minutes of your time, today if possible." The porch went quiet. From inside, the party murmured on, unaware, for one more moment. And then a voice came from the doorway behind Sterling. A big man, gray at the temples, a glass of wine in his hand. Warren Tice. The very man Sterling had thrown my daughter under a wheel to impress. Tice was looking at Francis, then at the leather case in my hand, and I watched him set his wine glass down on the hall table without looking at it, the way a man does when his whole attention has gone somewhere else. "Nell's Ridge Holdings," Tice said. It was not a question. "I have been trying to put a name to that entity for a year." He looked at me then, really looked, the way Sterling never once had in 12 years. You're Nell's Ridge." "My wife's name was Nell," I said. "Yes." I will not pretend I did not feel it that moment. The room behind Sterling had begun to notice. The murmur had changed. Faces were turning toward the door. Sterling Ashcombe looked from Tice to Francis to me, and I watched him do the arithmetic, and I watched the answer arrive. "That's not possible," he said quietly. "The Ridge note is held by. It's a fund. Some fund out of. It's held by me, Sterling, I said. It has been held by me for 9 years. Since the winter you were one payment from losing everything, and a lender you never met bought your note and never called it. The clock on the mantel ticked. I could hear it from the porch. That is how quiet it got. You, Sterling said, and that was all. Just that one word, the same word TC had said, but in his mouth it fell like a dropped plate. Nobody in that bright room knew where to put their eyes. I heard a fork touch a plate somewhere and stop. I saw a woman in a green dress lower her phone. Warren Tice was still looking at me with an expression I can only call recognition. One professional recognizing the load-bearing wall in a building everyone else had taken for decoration. Camille Ashcombe had one hand at her throat. A room full of important people, and not one of them could find a thing to say, because the story they had all been told about the old man at the door had just been corrected in front of them, all at once, without a single raised voice. And then Josie broke free of whoever was holding her and ran across the floor and out onto the porch and threw both arms around my leg. "Grandpa," she said into my trousers, muffled and delighted, entirely unaware that she had just walked into the middle of the loudest silence I have ever stood in. "You came. I knew you'd come." "Course I came, sweetheart," I said, and I put my old strong hand on her hair. "I've got something for you." Sterling Ashcombe lowered himself into a chair in his own front hall, as though his legs had quietly stopped agreeing to the job. We did not do the rest of it in front of the party. I have never wanted to be the kind of man who humiliates another man in front of a room, even a man who earned it. Whatever else this was, it was still Christmas, and there was still a child in the house. Sterling and Spencer and Meredith and I went into the study, and Francis came with us, and Warren Tice, at my nod, came too, because it concerned him and because I would rather a thing be done in the light. Sterling sat behind his big desk out of habit and then seemed to realize it was the wrong side of the room to sit on and did not know how to fix it, so he stayed there looking smaller than his own furniture. "You could have ruined me any morning for 9 years," he said. He was not performing now. The smooth was gone. "Why didn't you? You had it in your hand the whole time. Why would a man hold that and never use it?" "Because my daughter married your son," I said. "Because your granddaughter carries your name. Ruining you would have landed on them, not on you. It always lands on the wrong people, Sterling. That is the thing about ruin. It does not stay where you aim it." He had no answer for that. I want to tell you what I could have said, standing in that study, and did not. I could have reminded him of every handyman, every salt of the earth, every time he looked at my hands instead of my face. I had a speech in me, 9 years of a speech. I had earned every word of it. But I have buried a wife, and I have run a business through 2 recessions, and I have learned that the words you swallow rarely poison you, and the words you spit almost always do. So I swallowed the speech. It is still down there. I expect it always will be. That is all right. Not every true thing needs saying out loud. Some true things just need to be true. Spencer spoke up then, for the first time. His voice was unsteady. "Dad," he said, and I did not know at first which father he meant, and then I understood he meant me, and something turned over in my chest. I didn't know about any of it. I swear I didn't know he was doing that to Mare. "I know you didn't, son," I said, and I did. That was the mercy of it. Spencer had been handed a leash his whole life and never once been told it was a leash. "Here is what happens now," I said, and I kept my voice level, the way I keep it, because I have learned that a quiet voice is heard in a silent room. "The note stays where it is. I am not taking your house. You will keep your home and your name on your stone." Something flickered in his face. Relief, trying not to show itself. "But Spencer's financing does not run through you anymore," I went on. "As of the new year, my company refinances my son-in-law directly. He answers to me now, not to you. You do not hold his notes, you do not hold his roof, and you will never again use that boy's house, or my daughter's, as a leash. Because the leash is mine now, and I am cutting it." Spencer made a small sound. When I looked at him, his eyes were wet. Nobody had ever handed that young man a floor to stand on that was not his father's. He did not know yet what to do with one. Sterling looked at me for a long moment, and then because he was who he was, he could not help himself, and he said the last cold thing. "So the plumber wins," he said. "How satisfying that must be for you." I let that sit in the air. I did not answer it. There is a strength in not answering, and I have had a great deal of practice. Then I picked up my leather case, and I nodded to Francis, and I said, "Merry Christmas, Sterling." And I meant it as much as a man can mean a thing like that, and I walked out of the study. Meredith caught me in the hall. She was crying again, but it was a different crying now. She put her hands on my arms and looked up at me, and for a second she was 6 years old, and I was 31, and none of this had ever happened. "I thought protecting them meant losing you," she said. "Dad, he said if you came, he'd pull everything, and I believed him. And I said the worst thing I've ever said to anyone. To you, and you just said you understood." "I know," I said. "You knew." She stared at me. "You knew, and you came anyway, and you brought." "I knew from the mudroom," I said. "I was there the day before. I heard him. I heard you tell him he was your father." I put my hand against the side of her face, and she leaned into it. "I spent 2 years thinking you'd chosen them over me, sweetheart. Turns out I was the one who got it wrong. We were both wrong. In the same house. About each other." She laughed, one broken, wet laugh, and put her forehead against my chest. "Now come on," I said. "I have carried this present around for 3 days. Your daughter is going to unwrap it before I lose my nerve about the tin star on the lid." Winter turned the way it does. I would like to tell you that everything mended clean and fast. It did not. That is not how these things go, and I would not trust the story if it did. But things changed. In January, Spencer started coming to my kitchen table on Tuesday evenings with a folder of his own. Real numbers, his business, his debts, the mess a man makes when he has spent his whole life running on his father's credit and never learning how a dollar actually moves. "Nobody ever taught me any of this," he said the first night, embarrassed, spreading the papers out. "I always just asked my dad, and he'd hand me a number and a look." "Then we'll learn it," I said, "the way Nell taught me, slow and honest and out loud until it stops scaring you." So I taught him. He is a soft man who was raised by a hard one, and it turns out that under the softness, there was a man who only ever wanted somebody to sit down beside him and show him how the thing worked without making him feel like a fool for asking. His business is his own now, smaller than his father's, steadier. He is prouder of it than he has ever been of anything, and he should be. Meredith and I had to learn each other again. 2 years of my being wrong about her did not undo itself in one Christmas. There were careful phone calls at first, both of us stepping softly, both of us apologizing for things the other had already forgiven. But she started coming by on her own, without an occasion, which is the truest sign of a mended thing. She would sit in the kitchen and drink coffee from her mother's cups and tell me about her week. Sometimes we did not talk at all, and that was the best of it. One Saturday, she found the 2017 folder in my desk when she was hunting for a stamp. She read it standing up, the whole thing, and then she sat down hard in Nell's chair by the window and looked at me. 9 years, she said. You saved his whole life 9 years ago, and you never told a soul. You let him call you the handyman. It was never about him, I said. It was about you and Josie having a floor. He just happened to be standing on the same floor. I could not protect one of you without protecting all three. She cried a little then, and I let her, and I did not say anything, because some things do not need a wrench taken to them. They just need a person to sit beside you while you feel them. I never told the town. Dewey never told the town. As far as the diner knows, I am still just Harlan, who fixes things and shows up. That suits me fine. The people who needed to know the truth know it now. The rest of it was never for an audience. It was for my girls. Sterling came to my porch in the spring. I did not expect him. I looked up from Nell's flower bed one April afternoon, and there he was, standing at the bottom of my steps with his hat actually in his hands, an old man in a good suit who did not know how to stand on a porch that was not his own. We did not fall on each other's necks. That would have been a lie, too. But I let him sit down. We drank coffee. He said some things that were hard for him to say, and I could tell they were hard because he said them badly, in stops and starts, the way a man talks when he has never once in his life apologized and is trying to learn the shape of it at 70. "I looked at your hands the first day I met you," he said at one point, staring into his cup, "and I decided I knew everything about you. 12 years I did that." "A lot of people do," I said. "It's an easy mistake. I don't hold it against a man for the first year. After that, it's a choice." He nodded. "He is not forgiven, not all at once, not the way you snap your fingers, but the door is not closed either. It is standing ajar, and a man his age learning to knock softly for the first time is a thing I decided I could be patient with." The family got smaller that year and truer at the same time. Those two things happened together, and I have come to believe they usually do. Josie keeps her music box on her nightstand. Meredith tells me she winds it every night before bed, the little tin star turning under her lamp. When they come to my house now, all of them, for Sunday supper at my table instead of theirs, Josie always asks to hold my hand and turn it over. "Strongest hands," she says. "They're just old, sweetheart," I tell her. "The same as always." "No," she says, "the same as always. They're the strongest." I keep Nell's chair by the window where it has always been. I never moved it, and I never will. But this year I did one thing I had not done in 3 years. I pulled a second chair up beside it, for whoever sits down, for a son-in-law with a folder, for a daughter who finally came home, for a granddaughter who thinks an old man's hands are the strongest thing in the world, and is, in the only way that matters, exactly right. Nell's tin star topped the tree again this year. It always will. If you have ever been made to feel small at a table you helped to set, if you have ever loved someone who could not defend you out loud, if you have ever held a thing in your hand that could have destroyed the person who hurt you and chose to set it down instead, then this story was for you. If it meant something to you tonight, I hope you will share it with someone who may need to hear it. And tell me in the comments about the quiet person in your own family, the one everybody underestimated, the one who was stronger than anyone knew. Thank you for spending this time with me. And remember, no matter how old you get or how small they try to make you, the strongest thing you will ever own is the harm you choose not to do.